This station is now the ultimate power in the universe.
This table is really tilted.
Excuse me?
Am I gonna get a chance to speak?
Maybe I should take that back.
Denied. Damn, son, where'd you find this?
Take a giant step for mankind.
Welcome to the Tilted Table with your hosts, Sean and Joe.
Folks, welcome to the Tilted Table, the internet's answer to a question that no one asked. Episode 5. I am your co-pilot, Sean Landon Clark.
And I'm Joey Joe, the Fracky Mac, co-piloting this magic carpet ride.
Word. What is up, brother? How you doing?
Life's good, man. Excited to be here. Excited to be your Robin to your Batman.
Oh, I think you're Batman. You're more Batman than I am. So I thought today we'd kick off this episode with an idea that you came up with just recently, as a matter of fact, very recent. Talking about the first car that we have ever owned. So, Joe, what was the first car that you owned?
My first car was a 1969 Chevy Nova.
Nice.
Well, it sounds nice.
I got a similar story, but go ahead.
So I had saved up my money. I'm 16 years old at the time, and I had my heart set on a 1970 Chevelle 454 Super Sport, red with white racing stripes, Pro Street. Like, I had this thing built. I had the Summit Racing magazine flagged with all my different parts. I knew exactly, what the interior is going to look like. And my dad calls one day. We lived out in the country, and he said, "Hey, I found your car. Have your mom drive you to Sacramento, and it's waiting for you at this certain lot." And I'm like, oh, the day has actually come.
Nice.
I mean, this is after, several years of my planning. We pull up to this used car lot, and in the back is this 69 Chevy Nova that's avocado green. Half of the car is rust. The interior, I open the door just kind of like sags off the car. It doesn't even open correctly. And I have this mental picture of the car, the Chevelle that I wanted. I look inside of this car. It's got green shag carpeting.
Nice.
You can look into the car and see the ground beneath the car.
And the Chevy Nova was basically the poor man's Chevelle, wasn't it?
For sure.
Right?
For
Okay.
sure. And this just took things to a whole nother level. Instead of bucket seats, it was a bench covered in a old green velvet. It was awful. I wanted to throw a towel on top of the bench seat just to sit on it. It was like, I don't even want to know what's happened in this car. The whole thing was terrible. I'm actually, I think most things in life, as you get older and you regain perspective and you understand the things that are important. I'm now thankful that I had this awful vehicle. Oh, and it was also a manual transmission. I didn't know how to drive stick.
Yeah.
So it was a huge character builder. It wasn't like, for Cookie, where her very first car was a BMW 3 Series, like fully loaded, like all that kind of stuff. No,
I was kind of brand new, I guess.
Oh,
right?
yeah. I'm on the other end of that spectrum. And, just creeping into a parking lot in basically neutral, because that's as far as the car could make it. So that my 69 avocado green Chevy Nova. What was your first car?
I have a very similar story. My first car was a 1965 Ford Mustang, which in hindsight, I regret not keeping it because that car was worth money. It's worth money now, but it was worth money even back then. Yeah, I think what happened with me was I was probably 16 at the time, and I had about I think like $1,000 working and whatnot. I'd saved up a bit of money, and I wanted a car. I mean, it's I was 1990, and a car is extremely important during that time period. Today, with maybe the internet and FaceTime, kids aren't as hell-bent on getting a driver's license and getting a car because they can communicate with each other fairly easily and almost be in the same room even if they're not physically in the same room. So yeah, having a car was major. And it wasn't that I wanted a 65 Mustang. I just had a friend named Scott, and he was a burgeoning auto mechanic, and he had 3 cars. He had a 68 Mustang, a 65 Mustang, and I can't remember the other one, but it could have been like a 70s Camaro-ish or something like that, right? Mm-hmm. And of course, they were all just absolute shit. You know, a 16-year-old kid with 3 cars. You can imagine the quality of these cars. So he told me that he would sell me the 65 Mustang for $1,000. And I'm like, well, it really doesn't run that well. It needed a lot of work, obviously, very similar to your story. And he said, well, I'll help you fix it up. And I bought it. And of course, it pretty much just sat in the driveway, rotting. Never really got it running. And I eventually sold it. And the guy I sold it to tried to not pay me. And then that ended up in court. So that was that's another story. But yeah, and I don't, so when you were talking about like, oh, your first car, I guess my question would be your first car that you actually owned, or the first car that you had that you actually drove, because the 65 Mustang, I think I drove it 3 times.
Wow.
I mean, we got it running 3 times, and it's like, again, it was backyard mechanic stuff. It would run for, maybe a day or 2 and then die. Yeah. And Scott would always come over and I guess try to fix it. I'm not even sure what he was doing. Again, you're 16, 17 years old. Really don't know what's going on. And then that's when I learned a little bit about, first of all, owning a car is one thing. Paying for it in terms of gas, insurance is another thing. I should have never bought it. I'm actually surprised that my parents even let me do it. And I think that when I think about that time period, I think they wanted me to spend that $1,000 on a car as a lesson that you think you're going to spend $1,000 and just have a car. That's not how it works. Mm-hmm. And I learned that lesson. So that was the first car that I owned. Did you ever get the Nova running? Did you get it working?
Oh yeah. It became a project car for me and my dad. And so we had a lot of good memories of, like tearing that green shag carpeting out and seeing the rusted out floors. And then my old man showing me, this is how you get rid of rust. And,
right.
And then, welding in new floor panels, all that kind of stuff. So it was great. I did what every responsible high school student does and takes all of the money that they've saved up and spend it all on a stereo system.
Yeah, of course. I mean, back in our day, that wasn't more important than anything else in a car. You could have the most raggedy ass car.
100%.
Right? If it ran, the next thing is, if the engine's working, it's running, the next thing you have to do, get a badass stereo system.
Big system. Yeah. So a big system. Then my dad and I put a giant motor in the car and suspension and exhaust, and it turned out really cool. I was spending a lot of money on the wrong car because it was still a 69 Chevy Nova. And it was still avocado green.
Oh God.
All the way to the bitter end. Like everything else was super nice about the car, but it was still avocado green.
You didn't take it down to who
Mako?
Was it? No, what was the other one? Was it Schwab or Schwab? Like $100 paint job.
Something like that.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about?
I think rattle canning it would be the same equivalent.
Oh my God. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's good. At least you got the car, put together and running, and, did some work on it. I mean, I got rid of that car, and it wasn't until years later. God, I was probably 24 when I finally got a car that, ran. I think it was my second car. Did I ever purchase a car between? No, it was my second car, which was a 79 Toyota Celica hatchback.
I actually know exactly what that is.
Yeah. And it was that, typical beige, but it was well kept. It had 180,000 miles on it. And on a Toyota, that's in America, I transfer that over to the American equivalent. To me, is about 40,000 miles. Yeah. So I was able to drive that for a number of years until it started leaking. And I'm not talking leaking like from the engine. The damn car was leaking like it would rain and would be water all in my car. It was leaking through the hatchback. It was leaking through the windows. So ended up getting rid of that and bought a 2000 Eclipse, a used 2000 Eclipse.
Is that the Fast and the Furious one?
I've never seen Fast and the Furious, so I don't know, but I would be surprised if a 2000 Eclipse appeared in the Fast and Furious. Some of the later models are a little more sportier, so maybe so, yeah. But that's after that, I was only buying cars that were, a year old, maybe 2. I never bought a new car. I always thought that was a waste of money. And so I've always bought a car that's, a year or two old. Go down to like Hertz or go down to, like a CarMax or something like that and find something that is a year or two old, low mileage. And yeah, it's been gravy ever since. And like I said, I somewhat regret selling the Mustang, but I guess at 16, 17, you really don't have a choice. It's not like you can go drive that and store it and like, well, in 20 years, when I get, some money, I'll rebuild this thing from the ground up and it'll be worth a lot of money, which I don't know what a completely rebuilt 65 Mustang is worth, but probably worth the money you would put into it for sure.
Sure. My follow-up car, so at this point now I'm in college, and I had no money, and the Nova was gone, and I lived with my grandma or grandpa through college, and my grandpa said, Joe, we need to get you a car that we can get around. And I'm like, awesome. I would like to get a Camaro IROC Z convertible.
Yeah.
Red, black top. That's what I would like.
Nice.
And my grandfather said, that's awesome. We're going to give you the ranch truck, which is a 1974 Ford Ranchero, all 37 feet long of it.
Nice.
And so the Nova was oxidized avocado green. The paint on the Ranchero was an even worse oxidized, like poop brown. Like half the paint was gone. I actually had a roll of duct tape, 2 beach towels, and I am using my Dr. Evil quote fingers here, upholstered the seat because there really wasn't a seat or a bench seats to sit on, so to speak. There's all the stuffing in the seat had come out. There's no radio. You could like kick the door and like the speaker would like quasi work. The suspension was completely gone. So if you ran or went over a speed bump, half a mile down the road, the Ranchero is still floating up and down. I don't think it had been aligned in 30 years. So I would always make a comment about I tell my grandma I'm gonna go sail the high seas, and what that meant was when you took a hold of the giant steering wheel in the Ranchero, it had so much play in the steering. It was basically like sailing a Spanish galleon or something as you were driving down the road. So I again am a poor college student. I took some of my student loan money and I bought a really cool boombox. And I set it on my lap. Nice. And that was my sound system driving back and forth to school.
And that's a legitimate way to do it.
Yeah.
Back in my day, it didn't matter. Well, it did matter if you had a boombox in your lap, but as long as the music was loud enough that 4 cars behind you could hear it, you were
For sure.
you were in a good spot. It's funny that you had a Ranchero. My brother, he bought a Ranchero. It's one of these dumb stories. My brother just always made just the goofiest moves. It was my dad's friend, I think it was a 72 Ranchero, and it needed work. Again, it's an old car, and he wanted to sell it to my brother. My brother had $5,000, and he told him that he'd take the $5,000 and he would rebuild the car for him. That was kind of the deal. And my brother moved out to this guy's house. He lived out in the boonies, had this ranch house. And my brother spent 3 months living with this guy every day, getting up in the morning and working on this car. Or at least that was the plan. I think he spent 3 months getting this guy drunk. Nothing got done.
Oh.
That's my story with a Ranchero, which I think they're absolutely disgustingly ugly cars.
Awful, man. There was no R for the Ford on the tailgate. It was just FOD. So I call it the FOD. Yeah. Smoked like a crack pipe on a cold winter day. It was just all kinds of terrible. Which is why when the Ranchero finally died and it was time to I needed transportation, I couldn't afford a car. So I bought a pair of rollerblades and I would skate, which is from Ashland to Wolf to Fresno State and back every day, which is the equivalent of, I don't know, 18 miles.
Wow. We have similar stories.
Mm-hmm.
When I was in college, this is obviously after I got rid of the Celica. I didn't get another car. I'm not even sure I really wanted one, because after the Mustang and then the Celica experience, it's just like nothing I buy is going to be something that I can rely on, and it's just going to be a money pit of me trying to keep this car running. So I just got a bike. I found a bicycle at Fresno City College. It was leaning up against a tree. It had no seat. The tires were flat. The rims were bent. So I took the bike and walked off with it. And I took it back to my house. I was living at the Beehive. So there's Steven's Bicycle, where the axe throwing place is right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I went in there and I said, I've got this bike. Like, what would it cost to get, this, get it fixed the way at least I could ride it? And it wasn't terribly expensive. I think it was maybe like $100 or something. I got new tires and rims, and I'm sure they were the cheapest options I could get. Yeah, I put that bike together and I rode from the Beehive to Fresno State for class. And I had a job on campus until they moved the job out to Clovis and Shaw. So then I was riding my bike from Pullman Shields to Fresno State, then out to Clovis and Shaw, and then from Clovis and Shaw all the way back to Shields and Palm.
So you were gone with the Schwinn.
I was gone with the Schwinn, yeah.
Dude, that is a haul.
Yeah, and it's weird because you think I would have been in like massively great shape, but I think at that point I was drinking so much cheap malt liquor that it was offsetting it because it was basically what I was doing every day to be able to make that ride every day. I had to, when I got home, it was immediately like, crack open the books to do homework and grab a 40 of booze.
Are you the cyclist that you'd see smoking like a cool cigarette while they're riding?
No, I didn't smoke cigarettes in college. So that was an issue, but I may have been high. It's possible I was getting stoned, but I doubt it because I was riding down main streets, and I was one of those, this is stupid, but I didn't wear like a helmet. I didn't do any of that stuff. Matter of fact, I had mapped out how to even ride to these places without really ever being on a main street. Like I mapped out through neighborhoods. The only time I was ever on a main street is when I had to cross it to get into the next neighborhood and cut through. I was never on a main street. And I didn't have a helmet. I didn't do any of that shit, which is stupid, because, you hurt yourself, kill yourself. But at that time, didn't care. I'm not going to strap on a helmet. I'm not going to wear the bike pants. I'm not going to get the neon stripe down the side and ride like I'm a professional. Just get on the bike and let's go.
Well, so two things on it. One thing on the cars. So when I said, looking back and having perspective and being thankful, is, when you have just garbage trash vehicles. Yeah. And then later in life you have a nice vehicle, you appreciate it.
Of course, yeah.
It's like it wasn't handed to me.
Sure.
And number two, it gave me the opportunity to have some awesome experiences, like right when the Sony Discman came out. Yeah. With electronic skid protection.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the skid protection.
I would on Fridays is when I got my tutoring money, and I would skate to the warehouse. And then I'd go in and I'd buy some used CDs, and then I had a towel on the top of my backpack to cushion my Discman. Yes. And I still have all of those CDs, like, nice, to this day. Yeah,
that is awesome.
It's funny because they still have like warehouse used CDs, 2 for $5 stickers on them.
That's dope.
Yeah, yeah.
Places are gone. I love it.
And if I would have had like a super cool car, I never would have had those experiences.
Right.
So
yeah. Well, I mean, I think anybody that says that there's not value in that kind of struggle, I think they're wrong. I'd say 100% of the time. My senior year, I was dating this girl. Her name was Sherilyn. So this is 1992. She got a 1992 Firebird red, straight up red. And that was the one.
I like that car.
Yeah, I remember when I saw the car, I liked it because the front end where wasn't the headlights, but those lights that are like under the headlights, had kind of like a curve, almost like, Asian eye style. It looks so clean. And yeah, she drove that car into the ground. She didn't have any respect for it. And I remember specifically thinking like, my God, if I had this car, at least from my perspective, I'd be taking care of it. Right. So yeah, when you have to, go through that struggle, you appreciate those things even more. And again, I think it's a learning process where when I bought the Celica, it ran well for a while until it started leaking. It had some electrical problems, which I'm assuming came from God knows how much water was leaking and God knows where it was leaking. That it's like, okay, now I'm just going to get rid of this thing and I don't want to deal with the headache. And then you get a bike, and I rode a bike probably for 5 or 6 years easy until I got out of college. And then even then, my first job didn't pay that well. I was working as a journalist for a small paper, and I bought that 2000 Eclipse, and that car was what you would expect, had 160,000 miles on it. This is 1999, so the car was already 9 years old. It ran, but it was a lot of it was plastic and things were breaking off, and right. So I took care of it. I tried to fix it up as best as you can kind of fix up those kinds of cars. Right. It wasn't until 2002 that I actually bought, fairly new car. I bought a 2000, so that'd be 2001 because it was a year old. So I bought a 2001 Mercury Cougar. Oh, had like 26,000 miles on it. And yeah, that car was golden. And I think what I appreciated about it more than anything is not just, you have a nice car. For the first time in my life, I didn't have to worry about my car. I didn't have to worry about something falling apart or something breaking or constantly having to deal with some kind of problem, whether it was a small problem, whether it was a big problem. That car, every morning, started up, drove right out the door. Leather seats, paint job was great. Everything was fine on it. It was literally a brand new car. And ever since then, every car I've ever owned has been basically a year old. If it's older than a year, it's got low mileage. Like the car I have now, Infiniti Q60, I bought that in, when did I get that? 2021? So it's 2017, so it was already almost 4 years old. It had 12,000 miles on it. It was a car that was leased, and it just got passed around. Nobody bought it. So, but every day, I get up and I don't have to worry about it not starting. It runs great. It's a great car. And I think that's what I appreciate more than anything is I think people that don't have that experience buying these cars, and you buy these cars with like these kind of like, I don't want to say big dreams, but it's exciting. Like, I'm going to get a car and I'm going to do this to it. I'm going to put a stereo in it and it's going to be badass. And I'm going to be, the shit driving this thing down the road. Right. And you get these things and you realize that's not really going to happen. At least not on your dime, right? Again, if your parents paid for all that and you completely rebuilt it, and then you're almost in the same position as, just having your parents buy you a car. If you're not out there working on it or putting it together, fixing it. And if you don't have that money, what you have is the world's largest fucking paperweight. That's what you bought.
That's a fact, man.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please?
Leave a like on the video. I know you're enjoying this. Can you shut up?
The internet's answer to a question that was never asked. The Tilted Table with Sean and Joe.
So then did you ever have a cool car in your Pantheon?
I mean, the Ford Mustang technically is a freaking super cool car. The one I had wasn't, but generally speaking, they're super cool cars if you have a nice one. The Infiniti is the nicest car I've ever owned in terms of something that is fancy. So I had the 2000 Eclipse. I bought the Cougar. Now I like the Cougar, but I don't think that's considered fancy. It looked nice. It was kind of a sporty car. I had the top end model, had, all the bells and whistles and leather seats. I had that until 2009. So I had it 2001 to just about 8 years. And I sold it just because it hit 100,000 miles. And I'd gotten into this weird mode where it's like, I've always been raised this way. American cars at 100,000 miles, get rid of them. Yep. Yeah. If you want something that lasts longer than that, get a Japanese car. And so I got rid of that. I sold it to my friend's sister. And of course, within 3 years, she had that thing in a junkyard because she drove it into the ground. That's when I bought a 2007 Eclipse. So I went from an Eclipse to a Cougar back to an Eclipse. And that Eclipse that I had, 2007, I bought it in 2008. I had that all the way to 2020. Wow. And the only reason I really got rid of it was I got rear-ended, and it didn't do that much damage. But I was already looking for a new car at that point. Because, these cars, the engine and transmission, they were fine. It ran great. Never gave me any problems. But the car itself was falling apart. Again, it's all these plastic parts. Everything's breaking off. And so I said, well, I got to get a new car. And then I talked to Love about this, and she's just like, well, you get a nice car. And she was kind of pushing me to buy a Mercedes. But I've never been a car person. I think cars are mostly a bad investment. I'm not saying to go buy the cheapest car you can find, but I think it's foolish to buy, let's say, a $150,000 car. I think there's better ways to spend your money because you can get a perfectly nice car, a really nice car for $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. Again, it's not going to be the Mercedes or something super fancy. So when I went to a couple of car lots, and it had been so long since I looked for a car, I had no idea what the hell I was even looking at. I'm just like, I don't know any of these cars. Some caught my eye. I did learn that two-door cars are very rare these days. They don't make a lot of two-door cars. And I really didn't want a four-door. I've never liked four-door cars. So I'm like, I want something that is a two-door. And I just couldn't find anything. So I went back home and regrouped. And I said, well, what's the best way I can kind of figure out what's out there. So I went on to Carvana because they have every make and every model listed of every car in existence. So I systematically started at I don't know, could have been Acura or whatever. Looked at every model and like, oh, that one's nice. Would write it down on a piece of paper. And I went through all the cars and created a list of about 15 cars that I think I would buy. And then that's when I actually started looking specifically for those cars, CarMax and various car lots. And on CarMax, I found that the Q60, black sunroof, which I really liked. I'm like, cool, I would have a sunroof. And it was only $27,000. And I'd like the style. It's a 2-door, and the car was in Bakersfield, so they had to ship it up here. It wasn't from like the East Coast, which I'm always worried about used cars where it snows,
right?
So
salt.
Yeah, so I'm just like, okay, so they brought it up, and I jumped in that bad boy, and I'm like, I don't even know why I'm test driving this thing. Just I'm buying it, and I bought it with cash, which was a weird experience because I test drive it, and I just go down the street, whatever. I come back, I'm like, yeah, let's do this. And she's like, well, let's sit down at the desk and talk about, finance options. And we work with a bunch of different people. And I'm like, no, I said, I'm going to pay cash. And so I pull out my checkbook. And she's like, oh, okay. So I said, with all the tax and the doc and the license fees and all that shit, like, what is this? It's like $30,000. And I'm like, okay. So I'm just start writing a check. And a manager comes up to me and says, oh, okay, cool. Hey, nice to meet you. We need to verify that you have this money. And I'm like, okay. And it's like, so if you can you like log into your bank account and show us that you have $30,000 in the bank? And I'm like, all right. I felt somewhat violated, like, okay, but I guess I kind of understand.
Yeah, I get it.
So I log into my bank account and they're like, oh, okay, cool, awesome. Well, thank you so much. And, and they were super nice. And then of course, me being kind of the jackass I am, and I may have been slightly irritated. I just may have been joking because I'm a jokester by nature. I'm like, I go, yeah, you verified it, but what's stopping me from transferring that money out like in the next hour and just taking your car? And the dude gave me kind of a weird look. I'm like, dude, I'm just joking. I'm not gonna do that. So yeah, I think for me, that's always been the luxury to me is having a car that I don't have to worry about. And yeah, I think there's some value with owning a couple of tough cars, and maybe cars that you spent a lot of time working on, whether you were trying to fix them up or having to constantly repair them, that when you finally get a car that you don't have to do any of that stuff to, it's a nice car. It starts every day that you get into it. And, it's like any other kind of accessory, whether it's, your clothes or jewelry or whatever. If it looks nice, yeah, that's a big bonus. Like, cool, I'm riding down the street, I look good, car looks good.
One of the things I think is kind of funny is, so I am a big car guy. Growing up, I needed to have like 1,000 horsepower,
right.
Racing seats, all of the body kit.
I had
wheels,
friends that were just like that.
Nitrous bottles. I needed all the bells. I needed all the whistles. And now,
does that include a mullet?
Oh, bro, it was.
Did you have the mullet too?
I do. There's actually a website out there called mulletsonthego.com, and they have like 17 different. It's a mullet built into a headband. Nice. So I've always got one on deck.
All
man.
right, good to go.
You want to party? We can get down.
Right. Okay, so continue. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
So as I get older, though, it's like the thing that has never changed is I need to have a badass sound system in the car. But I would be totally cool with like a slammed minivan.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't need to go fast. I just need to get there.
Right.
I need to be comfortable.
Yeah.
And I need to have an epic sound system.
It's interesting because I don't think this is popular as it used to be. Working in high schools for many, many years, kids are content playing music on their phones, which I can't get that at all. I mean, being a musician myself, it was very important that if we listened to an album or a song that it was on a decent stereo or a good sound system, we wanted to get the full experience. But within the last at least 15 years, I have never heard somebody pull into the high school's parking lot bumping music, not once.
That's amazing.
That's something they don't care about. They don't.
Did you have an Alpine deck?
I never had a nice stereo. I could barely afford, a car as it stood. I think in my Eclipse, the first Eclipse I bought, I did put like a Kenwood CD player because it didn't have a CD player. But I didn't change out any of the speakers or anything like that. I didn't put any kind of amp in it. I was never into blasting music really loud in my car. At least, well, I shouldn't say I wasn't into it. I like the idea, and it's something I would have liked to have. I just never had the money, and my priorities weren't going to be like, oh, I need a huge sound system. But for some kids, they would have the worst beat-up ass car, and they would have, 420s in the back or whatever, just rocking their ride with these. They'd take the amp and they'd bolt it in because the stuff would get stolen. And so, they'd have the pull-out deck or the faceless deck, so you couldn't steal the stereo.
Probably had a club to go on the steering wheel.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Protected by Viper stand back.
Right. Viper was the main one, baby. You were top shelf if you had the Viper setup.
Absolutely. You saw that sticker on the window and you're like, I'm just going to keep on walking.
Yeah, you had to go somewhere else. Yeah, you had to find somebody else. So yeah, I was never into the big stereos. I think cars, as they got better, at least for me, the stock stereos in most cars are more than enough than I would need. They sound great to me.
Yeah, it's gotten better with time and depending on the brand of the car. In 2018, I met a super inspirational gentleman. I guess we can maybe do that story at a different time, but Audio Sound Lab on Blackstone.
Yeah, I'm familiar with those guys.
I told Cookie after I walked out of there and I told her about the great experience that I had. I said, you know what? I'm going to unleash my inner 16-year-old and I'm going to have him tear the entire car apart, dynamat, and we're just going all in on this deal.
Right.
And so she gave me the thumbs up. I left him the car for 2 weeks. I came back and dude, it's been awesome. So I am that guy creeping through the parking lot. The windows will be up, but the asphalt will be shaking.
That fits our generation. I mean, yeah, for sure. And I still hear, people bumping all the time. I don't hear it as often. And I will say that the last person I pulled up next to was in a lower truck and they were bumping whatever they were bumping. And if I had to guess the person's age, I would say we're in their late 30s or early 40s. So they're from the old school.
Yes.
They're from the old school.
The correct school. Or the correct school.
Right. Also, I think one of the things that may have altered how I thought about blasting music in my car is, growing up, playing in hard rock and heavy metal bands. That wasn't something you would necessarily bump in a car. It was mostly rap music. And we listened to rap music. We were all about it. But it would seem like, well, we're in bands and I have, a 412 cabinet powered by 200 watts of tube. I can get louder than any stereo in any car. I can make neighbors 3 blocks over hear my guitar if I want to get that loud. So maybe that's where I felt that my loudness came from. Like, if I want to get loud, I'm going to play guitar, play in my band, we'll rock this entire neighborhood to the ground. So the idea of putting a stereo in my car wasn't necessarily a priority to me because it's like, first of all, that's like rap music. I'm not blasting a bunch of rap music while I drive down the street. I certainly wouldn't be, blasting at a super loud like Guns N' Roses or Metallica or something. I know people did that. It wasn't something I was attracted to. So it's probably part of the reason why I never really got into the stereo systems in the car. I was in a band and we practiced in a garage. We got complaints from neighbors because it was so goddamn loud. So I'm like, yeah, there you go. That's how we disrupted the neighborhood.
Hey, is that a name of a band? Disrupting the neighborhood?
It should be if it's not.
Oh, quick side note. I came across, I was listening to a podcast and it was like, the podcast is about stoicism.
Okay.
And there was a comment that got made and I was like, ooh, I was at a stoplight, so I grabbed my phone and I made a note real quick. And I was thinking of you and the name of a band. They made the comment about an ephemeral dream.
Okay.
And I was like, oh, that is a clutch name for a group.
Ephemeral Dream.
Ephemeral Dream.
Sounds good. It sounds like an alternative
Which I
band.
guess you could, if you were to translate, means like a fleeting nothingness.
Right, yeah. Sounds like an alternative band. Well, I mean, it doesn't really matter. You can make anything into any kind of style of music. There's a band called Kitty, which is an all-female thrash band. So if you saw them and saw that name, you would think that they're like, some sort of pop band. Until you heard their music, and it's just like literally like, it's just like absolutely insane. I'm like, what the fuck?
Okay, well, going back to the sound system in cars and being older and like what I would want now. I'm definitely not in the market for a car, but the next one that I do get, I've always had a fascination. It's probably 20 years old now. Benz did a minivan,
Okay.
So I would do, and I rode in one once. I was like, wow, this is really nice. I feel like
I can imagine.
Old person saying this, but I can totally dig it. You can throw a
Right.
system in here, but I would wrap it black, and then I would throw a red stripe down the side like the 18 van.
Well, when you first told me about your dream car, it was red with the white stripe. I first thought, is this like Starsky and Hutch or?
Yeah. But I've always thought the 18 van was just such a cool ride.
Yeah, I'm picturing it in my head right now. I don't know what kind of van that was.
I think it was like a GMC.
GMC?
Yeah. That bubble window in the
Yeah,
back.
what I first thought is the bubble window. You have to have some kind of window on the van, which had to be bubble, because any other window made it look more like a work truck or some kind of work van. So it had to be bubble, and you couldn't have one that didn't have windows, because that was the child molester van. So you couldn't have that. So it had to be the bubble and the ladder on the back.
For sure.
That, for some reason, I guess you have to get on the roof of your car every once in a while. I'm really not sure.
Apparently.
Yeah, right.
The neat thing about the 18 van, other than it being the 18 van, was it had a wing on the roof.
That's right. Yeah, it did.
And I was like, that is so cool. If you go really fast, it keeps you on the ground. Those vans are so trick, especially if you see ones that are straight out of the 70s.
Right.
With the shag carpeting,
Sure.
a disco ball, little bed in the back.
Yeah. Those types of things are, they come back in style. You see them every once in a while, but they really don't make vans like that anymore. So I've always been more drawn to the VW bus if I was going to go with like a van, because I always thought those were super cool.
Like a Vanagon or like the window one?
Well, I don't even know. Like the VW, those just the buses. The surfers and hippies would always ride in them. I'm not sure the difference in between the models. I saw one on the street once, and I was with Love. And I'm like, oh, that would be dope. And she's just like, no.
I don't know. There's one Volkswagen van. I don't remember the year, but where the front windows open forward.
Yeah, I've seen those.
The surfer van.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's part of the original design or if that's a modification. I know people really mod those things out and do all kinds of kooky things to them. But the old school vans, I think, are super dope. And this actually goes back to the Ranchero. I always thought the Ranchero was an absolutely disgustingly ugly car, but I've always loved the El Camino. I've loved the idea of it's car and truck at the same time.
It's basically like the mullet of vehicles.
It is the mullet of vehicles, right? You don't see the old style vans anymore. They don't make those kinds of vans. And I think that's a shame, because some of them look really cool, especially in the 70s into the early 80s. 18 vans is a good example of those types of vans. It'd be cool to own one of those. But I mean, I would never buy one, I think, because largely it boils down to how many of those things are out there that are in good shape still. And if you do find one, what is that going to cost you? Is it really worth buying? Is that an everyday vehicle for you? Or is that just like a fun vehicle? And me not being a car person, now for you, it might be different. Owning more than one car seems like a huge leap of faith for me. It's something I would not probably do. Even if I like that, I should buy it. It'd be cool to have it. I think it would weigh heavy on me as it sits in my garage, and I'd look at it and go like, why do I have this vehicle?
But I have that.
Yeah.
It's a first world problem at this point, but I do have a fun project car. But in being a creative person, and if you're going to build a car, it's neat to be able to dream it. Right. And then it's about the journey, all the people you get to meet along the way, and then you build it, and then you realize, oh, I've got like one of 20 in the world that are at this level. Like that's it's a fun journey. And there are times that I'm like, that is so much money to be sitting on a battery charger. And then I get in the car and I start it, and then I hear the exhaust and I just start smiling, and the sound system kicks in, and I'm golden, man. I'm in a happy place.
Well, cars are your thing, and I think that everybody has those things that they like. I had an ex-girlfriend once tell me, if you like something, why not own it? Like, why wouldn't you own it? Even if you think it's something that is unnecessary, that's not the point. So if you like cars, you might have 2-3 cars, and you might have, your classic car that you ride on the weekend, or some other set of cars that means something to you. As a guitar player, I have 4 guitars and a bass. I only need one. And even then, I'm not even in a band right now, so I don't technically even really need one. I could, so yeah, why do you have, I have 2 Les Pauls, I have a JS 1000, a Joe Satriani signature guitar, and I have a handmade Lendola from Finland, a really beautiful acoustic guitar. And yeah, the amount of guitar I play, mostly on acoustic. Sometimes I'll plug in the electric if I'm, going to do some recording. But yeah, so yeah, somebody could look at me and say like, well, why do you have all these guitars? I mean, when's the last time you even played that Joe Satriani guitar? Probably 3 years. But I have it and I like it and it's shiny and
just
pretty.
Being able to look at it.
Yeah. And when I do play it, it rocks.
Well, and it was a dream to like think about it and then to know that you wanted it and then to get it. And then now you don't even play it, but you can look at it and be like, I've ascended the mountain, I've looked around, and the view is good.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I always wanted a Les Paul. They're expensive. So when I was able to buy one, I bought one. And I think at that time I may have thought like I've peaked. I've got the guitar I want. Until, of course, like everybody else, if you start making money and it's like, I actually can afford these things. And in your first time in your life when you're actually $2,000 may not make you or break you any kind of way. And, again, yeah, it's a first world problem. But when you start making that kind of money, I bought a second Les Paul and now I have two and it's great. I was switching them back and forth. If you watch old videos of my gigs, you'll see me with a black one. You'll see me with the Desert Sunburst one. And I always wanted a Joe Satriani guitar, specifically the JS1000, the first signature series he put out. And I wanted one of those, and they stopped selling them. So they do it's a lot like cars. They put out the line, it goes for a year or two, and then they came out with the JS 1500, the new one that he's playing. The new one that he's playing. And the problem with the JS 1500 was that it only came in two colors: candy apple red and chrome. So like literally like shiny, like a chrome bumper. I thought the chrome looked cool, not my style. Candy apple red, no. I'm not having a candy apple red guitar. And on those, and for the years, he would do this over the span of 2 or 3 albums where he would use these guitars. And then, another one would come out, another signature line, the JS 2500 or the next was. But the JS 1000 only came in one color, which was a charcoal gray. And it was a sweet color. And yeah, you couldn't find them. They were, long been sold out. And a Guitar Center in Los Angeles. And on their used shelf, there was a JS 1000 charcoal gray, looked brand new. And I'm like, oh shit. And I was like, is that thing worth money? Because I don't know how many of them that they made. I just didn't see them around. Once they were, the line ran out, I never saw them anywhere. And I asked the guy, I'm like, how much is this thing? He goes, it's $1,000. And I'm like, sold. You want to play it? No. Pull that thing down, wrap it up. I'm taking it home. And so, yeah, it's a great guitar. When I played you that song, that instrumental, that Joe Satriani cover, yeah, I used that guitar. You have to. Yeah, I'm not going to use a Les Paul for that.
No, it's the whole When in Rome deal.
Yeah, if I'm going to play a Joe Satriani song, I'm going to use his guitar. So I guess maybe obviously then at that point it's been less than 3 years. I recorded that 2 months ago. But generally when I practice or if I play guitar, yeah, that JS 1000 is the last one I'm going to grab. I always grab my Les Pauls and play with those. So yeah, I mean everybody's got their thing. If you got cars, go for it. Cars are great. My unnecessary purchases are going to probably be very musically driven. Definitely with more guitars.
Sure.
Yeah,
it's all good. Everybody can have their own version of an A-Team band.
That's right. And maybe if I can get a guitar and paint it with the A-Team stripe down it, best of both worlds, and put a fin on it, put a spoiler on it. I mean,
oh man, that becomes the if you know guitar.
Yep. That's how I'd be able to tell whether or not we could be friends. If I play that and I get off stage and somebody goes A-Team, I'm like, yeah, we can be friends.
That's when you do the secret handshake. Move on.
I have an important announcement for you, so stay tuned.
Yo, that's some next level shit, bruh.
So you got me. Big deal.
The internet's answer to a question no one asked. The Tilted Table with Sean and Joe.
All right, man. Well, this has been a lot of fun. It's one of my favorite memories. The cars that we drove up in, the cars that we look back on with good, fond memories,
and not so fond memories with some of the crap that we had to deal with. These bullshit cars.
Rocking the fob that smoked like a crack pipe. Well, on that note, man, it's always fun flying this magic carpet ride with you. This is Joey Joe, aka the Fracky Mac. I'm up and out.
Yeah, this is Sean Landon Clark, and I'm right behind him. See you guys later.